my hope today is I was just gonna tell you a little bit all about what we're building, and also tell you about like how I'm thinking about the future of development using agents. And I'm not sure how much agentic development stuff folks in this room have done. Actually, I'm curious, like show of hands, are folks in this room using AI developer tools these days at all? Are you using Cursor, Claude Code, anything like that? Yeah, cool. So we're building a tool in this space. I don't know if any of you have tried it or not. That doesn't matter too much. But what I want to do is like show you basically like how we're thinking about it, how we're thinking about the future of development, and I can give you a demo of what we're doing, and then maybe talk a little bit about like how we use tools like this internally at Warp and what our best practices are for using them. So that's my plan for today. I do think it'd be cool if this was like semi-interactive and not like so much me talking the whole time, but I do have some slides to start us off, so I'm going to start there. And I don't really know how these things usually go, so but that's what I'm going to do. Claudia, does that sound good?
That sounds perfect.
Okay.
Screen will save some time for questions at the end whenever you get through your content. And
Okay.
everyone, please have questions prepared to ask because Zach is very kindly giving us his time. So excited
Yeah, I
to
don't
hear.
know how much to make this about warp versus making this just about feature development versus like I really would like to make it interesting and useful to people in here. It's not what I don't want to do is like give like a product presentation for the thing I'm working on as much as like try to make this useful for people who are attending. But I think it makes sense to just start like a little bit with like with our product, just like you so you guys all get what we're building. Um by the way, has anyone here used it or familiar with it at all? Like maybe just hit your Zoom thing, wave button if you are. If not, no worries at all. Okay. So what is it? So I don't know how useful this timeline is going to be. I'm going to skip this, but Warp basically as a company started as a our vision was to try to like reimagine the command line terminal, which I assume you are all using, daily as you do development work. With the reason being that the terminal was like super widely used tool, that's I think generally not the most user friendly or approachable of all the developer tools. It's got like a pretty hard interface to learn. A lot of the power is really buried. Like you have to remember how to do things, and it's like it's not like a modern app. Like even like basic things like the mouse doesn't work in your terminal. So it's a very weird experience. And so the original product vision we had was like, let's build a more usable version of this. And we built that and the we actually got a lot of developers using it. There's over 500,000 active developers in Warp now. But the thing that's changed in the past, couple of years is that LLMs have come along, and it's my view that LLMs are fundamentally changing how development works. And what I think, skipping this, like what I think is happening, and I don't know how this is going to impact everyone who's in this room, but I think we're moving from a world where development is traditionally been done by hand to one where it's being done more and more by prompt. And what I mean by that is like um, the traditional way of coding. And my background, by the way, is I've been a developer for like over 20 years. I used to be a principal engineer at Google. I led engineering on the Google Docs team. And my workflow in that period was always like, hey, I want to build a feature or fix a bug. So I'm gonna go ahead and open up my IDE. I'm gonna find all the files that I need to edit. I'm gonna like find all the places. I'm gonna type all the changes. Then I'm gonna hop over to my terminal and I'm going to run a bunch of terminal commands to build the code. I'm going to do a bunch of stuff in Git. Maybe I'm going to deploy it by writing commands to do stuff in Docker. And I think what's happening is that everything is going up a layer of abstraction so that rather than writing so much code by hand or writing terminal commands, what people are going to be doing is basically writing prompts to ask an agent to do some amount of their work for them. The agent is going to do it, and then you as a developer, your job is going to be like, how do you guide the agent? How do you collaborate with the agent to get the result that you want? And so that's like what we're building towards. I'm super curious because folks in this room are learning how to write code by hand, right, Claudia? Is that like accurate? Like, so I do think in this new world, it's going to be equally, if not more important, that you actually know what you're doing because the agents need review, they need guidance. But I do think like you're going to learn all this stuff, and it's going to kind of be a little bit like learning how to do math. And then there's, when you get into the real world, you're going to be using a spreadsheet or something like that, and you're not going to be doing this stuff by hand so much. And so, what does this look like? I'm going to show you what this looks like in Warp, and then I would be. I just want to like maybe have a discussion with people, and I'm curious how people think about this. But let me show you what I think that the new world is going to look like. Let me share my entire desktop so you can see this. Actually, while I bring this up, if people feel free to put questions in the chat, or if you want to like raise your hand and interrupt me, that's fine too. I'm really very curious how folks in this room are thinking about this. Eric, you have a question? I see your hand.
Yeah, real quick question. Is your app built on Towery? Is that where the Rust integration on the website talks about?
No, it's built actually purely from Rust. And so we can talk about Warp is built too. So Warp is built, it's like a pure Rust app. We do all the rendering ourselves too. So we really built this the hard way. Meaning everything from like we have shader code for basically drawing rectangles and rendering glyphs on the screen. And then we have a UI framework that lives on top of that, which resembles Flutter a bit. I don't know if folks in here have tried Flutter, but uh, it's a totally custom Rust code base that we've made work across Mac, Windows, Linux, and also we've cross-compiled it to WebAssembly and WebGL for the web. So it's a really interesting app architecture, which if folks want to talk about why we built it that way, I'm totally down to. Um, but what I wanted to kind of show you all was what I think the workflow is going to look like. Or I can show you just Warp for a second, actually. So let me show you Warp. So Warp, can you all see my screen, by the way? Cool. Okay, so Warp is a terminal. And so again, if you are all using like iTerm or the VS Code terminal or whatever, you'll find Warp pretty familiar in that you can just kind of like run normal commands in here, and it will just function as like a terminal. It's actually, I think, quite a bit nicer than a normal terminal. So if anyone's looking for just a plain old terminal that has a better interface, you might like Warp. And the idea here, like the ways in which it's nicer, I'll just show you really quickly. So I'm searching through my past history here. One thing that's cool about Warp is that the mouse works in your terminal input. And so, for instance, if I want to double click and hit delete, I can do that. If I want to undo redo, I can do that. You get syntax highlighting. You get sort of completions out of the box without having to configure anything. And the completions also show you documentation around what the commands do. And then the other thing you'll notice is that there's this sort of like structure in the output that is a little bit more like a notebook. If any of you have used like Jupyter notebooks or something, where you can sort of navigate your past terminal commands, command by command, and do nice things like copy paste or share. You can attach them as context to AI. So it's a really nice ergonomic terminal if anyone is looking for that. But the cool thing is that you can also just directly interact with an LLM in the same UX. So I could just be like, tell me about the current project I'm working in. And so this, rather than being interpreted as a command, will be interpreted as an LLM query, and it will go into a flow where it gathers the information that it needs by generating commands and sort of reading your current context. It's going to read my README. It's going to do this, learn about the remote, and sort of, well, eventually, I kind of gave it like a big thing here. It should eventually, yeah, it'll tell you, this is basically telling me what I'm doing. So this is Warp's internal repo, it tells you the language, what branch I'm on, etc. What's cool is like you can basically have this do anything for you. Yeah, Carl, I see a question.
Yeah, I was just curious about like the sources it was showing at the top. So is it basically for those, yeah, at the beginning? So what is it actually looking at under the hood here? Because I'm noticing like it's sometimes referencing, oh, this is a command versus this is a specific file that I assume it's parsing. So
Yeah,
under the hood, is it like integrating it or?
yeah, so the way this works from an LLM architecture standpoint is that it makes a bunch of tool calls and it has different tools available to it. So have any of you all built LLM applications yet? Have you guys covered that? No? A little maybe? Okay, so it has the ability when you call the LLM, you're saying like, hey, like here's all these tools that are available to you. And one of those tools is something called a requested terminal command. And that's so it can basically say, okay, in order to answer this question, I want to issue a terminal command. And so the first terminal command it's doing is like the same thing I would do as a human. It's running ls-la and it's seeing all of this. And then this gets passed back in as terminal context. It also has another tool, which is basically a code base embedding. And so have you all covered vector search? I don't know what has been covered in here or not. So it's able to it has a sense of like what each file semantically means by putting it into a sort of vector space and doing vector search. And so it's looking here for our README file, and then it is basically reading the contents of that file, and then it's running some more commands. And so it has a whole bunch of tools. So it has commands, it has code-based context. It also has something called MCP. Anyone in here familiar with that as like a tool? So MCP is pretty neat. So MCP, and this is not specific to Warp. So if you're using any of these AI tools, you'll get to learn how experiment with some of this stuff. But what MCP does is it lets you uh, bring external context from a server into your LLM. And so, for instance, if I wanted to have the LLM understand something from our linear, which is our task board, I could ask it to read that info. And same thing from our Notion site or from our Sentry, I could have it read from Slack. And so what a lot of these AI tools are doing now is letting you bring in context from a bunch of different places, which is useful as you build. And so I'll give you an example of how we might use like linear, for instance, with MCP. Um, so if I wanted to, one of the crazier things that's happening right now is you can basically tell tell your developer tools about your issues and have them try to figure out how to fix them for you. So let's see if I can find a good one of these here. So here's an issue. So again, in the normal developer workflow, what I would do as a developer is I would pull up my task tracker, I would look at an issue, I try to understand the issue, and then I would like find the right place in the code to make a fix. Here, in like the new world that's coming, I can just sort of tell my AI tool, and it'll be Warp in this case, that I want help fixing an issue. So I'll be like, I want help fixing this linear issue, and I'll paste this in. And I'm going to actually talk to Warp. So Warp has the ability where you can literally just speak to it. So I'll be like, can you understand what this issue is and help me come up for a plan for fixing it? Don't make any changes yet, except it's fine to create a new branch for fixing this linear issue. And I think I may have tried to
That's
fix this
just
one
so
earlier.
cool. That's just
Uh,
so cool. I
so
couldn't keep my mouth shut. It's just so cool.
I mean, it's a
This is
crazy
awesome.
world to be coming into
Yeah.
as a developer. Like these new tools are gonna make you so powerful. But what I think what's really what I do want to talk a little bit about is like how if I were just coming into development, how I would approach using these so that you get the most out of them. But I'm gonna say one other thing to it, which is like please, if there is an existing branch for this already, first delete it because I want to start this demo over. Okay, so I'm going to tell it to do this, and again, this was all like, I want to emphasize science fiction like 6 months ago, a year. But now just like what it's doing is it's doing what I said. So it's pulling the information from linear, understanding what this issue is. It is deleting the branch like I asked it to. Do you all use Git in the command line, by the way, or do you typically use like a Git client? Okay. So even for just doing Git stuff, the ability to do it in natural language, I find much more valuable than trying to like remember all the commands. However, like with everything else, I would learn it the real way first because otherwise it's very easy to go off the rails here. So what it's doing now is exploring the code. It's searching for the code related to this issue. And by the way, what this issue is that we have in Warp, we have this command palette and it's missing something for toggling on and off a certain feature that we have. Carl, yeah.
Yeah, so does that mean that out of curiosity, so each of these steps that's being documented, like with the tick box, is it effectively updating its own context window?
That's
Like as
exactly
it
what's
goes through.
happening.
Okay.
Yeah, if you were to look behind the screen, sorry, behind the scenes at what's going on right now, is it's filling the context window with what it thinks of as the relevant information for this task. So and some of that's happening through RAG, which is the vector search. Some of it's happening through issuing these commands, and it's going through a process right now of providing the LLM, which under the hood here, this is using Sonnet 4 with the right information. And so it's going to even get to the point where it's like wants to start doing stuff, which at some point um, I want to show you what that looks like. So it's doing all of this. It's still in a information gathering phase right now. And I asked it actually, I think I asked it to just give me a plan, not to actually do anything. Um, So I said, don't create any changes. So if it does this right, and this is actually a good way to work with AI. So if you're working with an AI tool, I would always ask it to explain what it's trying to do and how to think about it, not actually make any changes. And actually, while this is running, maybe I should kind of go back to this for a second and, like talk a bit about how I would think about using these tools in case it's interesting for you all. So I do think if you're going to be professional engineers in the world where these tools are coming out, whether it's Warp, Cursor, Cloud Code, whatever, you're going to want to spend time learning how to use them. I would only do that though after, to go back to like the calculator analogy, like I think it's highly worthwhile learning how to do all this by hand. Otherwise, you're not going to know what the tools are doing, and that's a recipe for disaster in any kind of professional coding environments. Um, I think these are more advanced tips. I want to go back to some of this, like the other stuff that we're telling our own engineers on our team how to use these tools. So I want one thing I always emphasize to our engineers is like using an AI tool does not remove the responsibility for the code. You are responsible. You should view using these tools as the same in the same way you would view using like autocomplete or like you'd never blame a bug on like your IDE. You shouldn't be blaming bugs on AI. You are primarily responsible for any of the output from these tools. Um, Another big tip for using these tools is to use them as an engineer and tell them how to do things. Don't just tell them the outcome that you want, which is I'm kind of giving you a bad example here, actually. Like you should be telling them how to write the code, which might seem like counterintuitive, but like you should tell them, hey, this is what the model should look like. This is what the API should look like. Uh, and that's the best way, especially at the beginning, to make sure that you comprehend what they're doing, but it's also the best way to guide them to do something that is actually going to result in code that can be merged. Um, you should, this is another thing, we don't change the quality bar internally at Warp at all for when you use these tools. So it's like the code that they produce is going to eventually be reviewed by a human. And so it needs to be at the same quality bar as if you wrote it personally. Like that's our other sort of thing here. So let's see how we're doing here. So did it listen to me or not? Did it actually? No, it didn't listen to me. So another problem with this stuff. So it just went ahead and made a code change for me, which I explicitly asked it not to do. So I'm a little bit annoyed that it did this actually. Um, and I'm gonna stop it. I'm gonna say start over. I'm gonna say, let's see, that's what it did. So it modified this. It shouldn't have done this. I'm gonna go back and be like, I explicitly don't want you to make any changes. I want you to explain what changes you would have made. Please revert the change that you just made and start again. Everyone's job is safe here for a while, just so you know. Jamie?
I was just gonna say, was it potentially because you gave it a second prompt after that?
I
After
think
the don't do it, but then it was listening more to the second thing you said. Half
I
of
think
this class has
yeah.
done some work with AI, ML, LLM, and the other half
Okay.
hasn't gotten there yet. So I'm like,
Okay.
ooh, what happened?
Yeah, I didn't know where you all were at, but what you
Valid.
will
Yeah.
find is that there is like a level of skill or intuition to working with these tools. They're kind of like they're kind of like savants in some weird way. It's like they know
Yeah.
everything, but they also then do stuff that you really might not want them to do. And so there's a whole flow of iterating with them where you have to be really explicit. Being really explicit is what I would say. And so yeah, exactly. That it did the wrong thing there. Carl, I see another question.
Yeah, I guess I'm still thinking about like the context window and how it's updating itself.
Yep.
To start with, right? Because you were talking before about that tool. I forgot the name of the tool, but the retrieval augmented generation, all that.
Yep.
What is the starting point that the model is using in terms of materials to inform itself on your prompt one way or another? Because intuitively from this, we have to have fed it your code base already, your server information already, including your task board and all these things. It must know these things before you ask it to prompt it, right? Or is it that it's only looking things up in your task board in relation to your specific request?
Great question. So the basic thing that it has is a system prompt. And this will be like a little bit like just like LLM engineering. So it has a system prompt, which our system prompt, you can imagine it being something like you are an intelligent coding agent that lives in the terminal. And then we don't encode any user specific context into that system prompt, but what we encode then is like you have a bunch of different tools available at your disposal to gather the context you need in order to solve the user's problem. And so it literally then looks like a list of these tools, and each tool has a sort of schema where it's like, if you want to execute a terminal command, here's how you call that tool. If you want to look up code, here's how you execute that tool. If you want to make a MCP server call, here's how you execute that tool. And so we list out these tools, but it's basically starting from scratch, which is crazy, right? The other thing that it has um, is something called rules. And so these are actually inserted into the system prompt, and these are user specific. And again, you'll find some variant of this in a lot of different AI tools where these are they're what they sound like. They're rules. They're repeatable things that I want the AI to sort of take into account whenever it's doing a task for me. So just to look at one of these, um, I say Rust imports. So I say when making code changes to Rust files that introduce new symbols, always make sure to update the imports. Our import style is to use is adding use statements at the top of the file, not within blocks. And if you need to guard statements with CFG directives, that's fine. So this is a very code base specific, warp specific thing that you would set up. So this is one way of like avoiding the like start from scratch problem is you can insert these things into the system prompt. Does that make sense, Carl?
Yes, so you're supplementing the system prompt itself,
Yeah.
even before we're getting to the user and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
so you supplement that, and then the other thing, like the other big thing, like I said, is like it has all these tools available, and so um, it basically gathers context as it goes. The one other thing that I think is cool to mention is that there's another way of like having it not start from scratch, which is to reuse the user prompt. And so again, there's various features and different types of AI tools for doing this, but in Warp, we have this feature that's called saved prompts, which lets you reuse a system prompt. So here's like I think a really cool like reusable prompt just to show you what this looks like. So in professional programming, professional software development environment, like you often will not want to burden your teammates with large pull requests. It's like a big no-no. It's like makes it very hard to review, but sometimes you might end up in that state. And so a really cool shared prompt or saved prompt that I use for this use case is one where I ask the LLM to help me break a PR into smaller components. And so what I find the more that I work with these AI tools is that there are these repeatable workflows. And so one of the cool things you should do is think about like how do I save this and reuse it so that I'm not always starting from scratch. Does that make sense as well as another way you can not start like avoid this like cold start problem?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. Eric, I see a question.
Yeah, was there anything behind the decision to only offer an agent mode and not like an ask or an edit like Copilot and some of the others?
To not have like sorry like an editor.
Ask, yeah, the ask or the edit is
Oh,
just
ask right. So yeah, I think like the way that we think about this is that like you can just ask if you want. Like, and so the way that we think about sorry controlling the permissions, which I think is kind of what this comes down to,
Mhm.
um, is again, and this is Warp specific, but this I think various AI tools have different versions of this, is that we have different granular permissions for what you might want to let an agent do or not do. And so for each of these things, so like there's these different capabilities that the agent might have. So one would be like applying code changes, another would be like reading files or creating plans or executing commands. Or you can even get more granular, like within executing commands, what commands are allowed and what commands are denied, what MCP servers are available. So the way that we think about this is that these things have different sort of permission levels where you can let the agent have autonomy. So I'm set up right now where I just let the agent write code for me, which is probably riskier than maybe most of you want. But you could also go into a mode where the agent will, whenever it proposes a diff, ask for you to approve it, which is probably a good place to start. Or there's another mode here where it's like you can let the agent sort of decide whether or not it thinks it's a low risk or whether it needs your help or not. And so that's actually our default. And same thing for these other things is like our default is that the agent will loop you in if it thinks it needs your help. But if you want like the more conservative approach, you can always be like, always ask me and it will do that. And so this is how we're building this up, where it's like you have these different sort of like permissions. But the next thing that we're going to add with this, not to go into our roadmap, but is the ability when you're on a per agent basis to be like, I want this agent to have these permissions. And that might be because you're working in production, you might want something that's more restrained. But if you're working on like a marketing project or whatever, and there's like less risk of error, you might be like, you know what, let it go wild. So that's how we're thinking about it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Carl.
On the idea of context and different agents having like different permissions to do different things, right?
Yep.
We were previously seeing like how it was thinking is a strong term, but step by step how it was reading, parsing information, getting to an outcome, deriving syntactic meaning, and then updating its context window, and then doing that over and over and over again to get a result. And
Yep.
you said on the back, not on the back end, but under the hood, you could in theory see like a record of how the thought process, for lack of a better term, is progressing for
Yep.
the agent, right? Does that mean that in theory you could, let's say after like as it continues to update its context window, it starts to kind of go off the rails, for lack of a technical term, and starts to go in a direction you can clearly tell it's not what you want. Is
Yep.
it possible to roll it back to that stage and then make it start revert going to another direction, or hopefully it closer to the direction you want?
It's a great question. So this is a feature that we also want to build, and this is, to me, this is a great example of like the stuff that people who are coming into development now are gonna need to like learn how to think through is like, how do I get the most out of this technology? Because yeah, you're absolutely right. It can go off the rails, it can go down a path that you don't want it to go to, but maybe it had made some progress. And so I think the way that we are going to support this, like we don't really support this right now, is with either some concept of like you roll back or you have a checkpoint, something like that, so that you can restart the agent from like a good context state. I also think you could do something really cool where it's like if you get to a good context state, you might be like, you know what, spin up three agents from this state and let three of them try to figure out different solutions and let me see which one is best. And so, I think we're going to be in a world where developers are like multitasking with these things and like actually running multiple things in parallel with them. I also think, by the way, that I don't, it's not just going to be coding tasks that people are doing with these agents. It's going to be like production stuff, which are you all dealing with any like cloud deployment? Again, I don't know the state of everyone. Yes. Yeah, so one really powerful like use for these agents is to deal with anything in the cloud. And so for instance, I have a one of these like save prompts that I could just show you, which is like if I wanted to analyze what's going on with my logs on Google Cloud, I could just run this. I'll run this while I answer Sam's question here, but like you could have these things going in parallel. Sam, what's your question?
So my question is more about like uh the process of like creating a good set of rules for
Yep.
like your team's code base. Like how do you like envision a developer discovering what makes a good rule? Is it mostly trial and error, or have you like started to see any patterns of must-haves for common environments like Node
Yeah.
or Python?
Great question. So I actually think that the way that this should go is that the rules should mostly be like suggested or inferred by the model. Like, I don't really love the make a user do a ton of work. We don't today we do, but the with today's technology, if you're making the rules by hand, I think like think about the types of things where if you were getting a code review, someone would be like, here's how we do it here. And so like, what are the conventions of your code base? Which, if you have an agent that's writing code, you want the agent to do it in a way that meets those conventions so that you're not wasting someone else's time down the road. And so for us, again, I can just show you some of ours to give you more of a flavor of what those rules might be. So I showed you the Rust import ones. I have a lot of rules that are around like terminal workflows. So for instance, I have a rule here around like run our linter whenever you make PRs, for instance. And so that just is like saving me time by telling the agent what workflow that I want. Or I have a rule telling our agent where our CMS is located. And so it's like DRY, like don't repeat yourself type principles. But for workflows that you're doing with agents is I think a good way of thinking about it. Like just like you need DRY for like if you're coding, you need it for as you interact with these agents. I saw another question from Carl. Carl, what's up?
Yeah, yeah. So but then to go back to your previous point of like, so these rules are the ways you're enhancing your system prompt for the specific user slash for that specific agent, right? When you're giving it prompts. So to put it another way, the way we're differentiating responses based on a specific code base or a specific organization's habits and preferences. It's
Yep.
all in the rules. We're not like we're not changing the model anymore. We're not doing fine tuning on it for the specific code base. We're using our rules to enhance the prompting for it.
Correct. So you could do this, by the way, different ways.
Yeah.
Like you could train a model per code base, per organization. Like for us, because we're like a very horizontal tool that's used in, I don't know, a gajillion different code bases and environments. We keep uh, we do it at the level of like rules and code base embeddings and stuff. And one other big thing to keep in mind is that when you're programming against an LLM, it's a stateless API. So like you need to pass in every request all of the context it needs. So like these LLMs, they're giant token prediction machines, right? And so it's a model plus it's some amount of context. And what it's doing with that is predicting what the next token should be. And the models themselves are just like stateless function calls, which is a crazy thing to imagine. And so if you want it to continue this conversation with you, you iteratively build up this context window and you just keep passing it back and forth. Now there is like the model providers, if you all are building apps with LLMs, they have something called prompt caching, which makes it so you don't have to like it's just like an implementation detail to make this whole process more efficient, where the whole prefix of your conversation is just like it's only being appended to. And so that's like a way that you can make this more efficient. But in it at its heart, these are stateless APIs. And so yeah, you're basically starting from scratch every request, which is wild. Now the model providers may build some sort of state, but right now all the state management is essentially at the application layer. Merrick, if I'm saying your name right.
Yeah. How do you handle a limited context window? Because I can imagine as it, just through a one prompt that you send it, it does like 10 different tasks. And
Yep.
so, like, what's your strategy on optimizing it such that you can really withstand the conversation for as long as possible? Because I imagine that the longer you talk to it, it has to truncate
Totally.
yeah. So,
Yeah, great question. So I think this is like an area like where there's a lot of different strategies that people are trying. So the failure mode right now, like let's say that I fed in like 1,000 files and I didn't do anything smart. What would happen is like all of a sudden your context would only contain those 1,000 files tokens, and the original task that you were trying to solve would be totally lost to the LLM, and it would start doing totally weird stuff. It could go in circles, like it could just like produce random tokens. And so what we do in terms of strategy is some amount of like summarization essentially, and then some amount of like truncation. So the summarization, the way to think about it is like when you start to fill up the context window beyond a certain amount, what you then try to do is you try to summarize the conversation so far using another LLM so that the essential like contents of the task remain, but whatever the sort of cruft was gets compacted away. And you do this iteratively, kind of like almost like a garbage collection algorithm. I don't know if you all are learning about that, but you compact it and so that you can continue the conversation. Sometimes we just end up having to like truncate. Like if there's like imagine someone runs git log and it produces like a million lines of like an entire repo's history. You don't want to send that whole thing over. And so we will do some sort of truncation and just try to maybe take the last part of it. But there's this compacting is the general strategy that we use. The other strategy that other tools use that we've looked into is you can do something with multiple agents, like multiple context windows, where you can essentially have an agent that has its like let's say we were just trying to like gather context around files. You could have one agent that has its own totally separate context window, do that, and just answer whatever question you're trying to answer and pass that back to the main agent. and have that smaller answer go into the main agent's context window. So like this context engineering, prompt engineering is all something that's I think super interesting for anyone who's like building tools with LLMs. Anyhow, I have no idea if this has been like helpful for you all or interesting or not, but it's I guess my like I probably should start to wrap things up, but like my kind of parting thoughts to for all of you who are learning how to develop right now is like I think the way I would approach it is like I would definitely learn the fundamentals of coding like as strictly as you ever could. You really need to know what's going on because these tools are view them as tools. Don't view them as like something that's gonna like you're gonna be able to not do your job or not understand what's going on. That's a sure recipe for disaster. My second piece of advice would be to actually learn how to use these tools and learn because there is like skill in it. And like the best engineers in a year or two are going to be the ones who not only know the fundamentals of software development the best, but also know how to use these AI tools the best to get the most work done. And the final thing is like they're kind of fun to use. Like there's like intuition around them. Like there's like a if you like doing programming, you will like the puzzle of figuring out how to use these tools to get the most out of them.